80-year-old grandmother was asking a young man for a marriage match, but the young man insisted she buy an auspicious jade worth 8 million yuan. Rose immediately saw through the scam, chased him off, and shared her last half bun with the hungry old lady. Just then, Jack arrived to pick up his grandmother, only to get hit on the head by Rose, who thought he was another scammer. The grandmother invited Rose to join them for lunch and hinted she wanted Rose to marry Jack, but Rose was more interested in borrowing some money. Jack assumed Rose was a gold digger and decided to hide his true identity to test her. After they registered their marriage, Rose was stunned to see the luxury car that came to pick Jack up. Jack claimed he was the driver for the boss, quickly ushering his confused assistant into the back seat while he played chauffeur. Watching Jack work on their wedding day, Rose felt a pang of sympathy, but Jack mistook this for disappointment over his low status, reinforcing his belief that she was a gold digger. When Jack returned to his modestly arranged residence, he found he had no key. Luckily, Jack's grandmother was already inside waiting. Rose looked at the spacious apartment, suspicious that it must be worth at least 10 million, questioning Jack's identity. Jack brushed it off, saying it was his boss's lent marital home. Rose gifted the grandmother some expensive jewelry, which made Jack start to warm up to her. After dinner, the grandmother smiled mischievously, having slipped something into their food. As both felt a rising heat and discovered the door locked, Jack called for his grandmother to open it, but she pretended not to hear, eagerly awaiting great-grandchildren. As Rose, now drugged, began caressing Jack's chest, he couldn't help but kiss her back, and she wrapped her legs around his waist. They made their way passionately from the door to the bed, spending a heated night together. The next morning, Rose teased Jack about his age but complimented his physique, curiously touching his chest. Jack woke up and asked what she was doing. Embarrassed, Rose turned away, saying she was just checking his body. Jack rolled her beneath him, asking for her verdict. Rose, pretending to be indifferent, said he was passable. Jack, brimming with confidence, laughed and said she didn't inspect carefully enough. Rose covered her eyes, but Jack, already dressed, teased her as a female rascal. Later, Rose handed the 6,000 yuan Jack had given her to her teacher for tuition, but the teacher began making advances. Rose fought back, and Jack arrived just in time. The principal immediately fired the teacher. Rose was surprised by Jack's influence as a mere driver, and joked that he seemed like the emperor's eunuch from ancient times. Jack drove off in anger, but Rose received an internship offer from Jack's company, marveling at his harsh words but soft heart. Rose prepared a lavish dinner to thank Jack, but when he arrived, her grandmother dashed out, not even staying to eat. Jack tasted Rose's steak, delighted inwardly but only gave a lukewarm, passable rating. After dinner, they returned to the bedroom to find the bed covered in rose petals, clearly her grandmother's doing. Meanwhile, the grandmother was telling her friends about her grandchild-making plan. Jack couldn't believe his 80-year-old grandmother had masterminded it all and accused Rose of planning the romantic setup. An innocent Rose hurried to clean up, but she accidentally pulled Jack down onto the bed. Jack kissed her, but she pushed him away, complaining about his glasses poking her. Jack, exasperated, removed his glasses and kissed her deeply, his large hands caressing her neck, igniting her once again. They spent another passionate night together. The next day, the grandmother bought Rose a pile of luxury goods, Hermes bags, Chanel purses, and Patek Philippe watches. Rose jokingly asked if she had robbed a bank. Jack quickly explained that she forgot her medication, and whenever she did, she bought fake goods. Rose, believing this, assured her grandmother she loved the gifts to preserve her dignity. The grandmother beamed and offered to drive Rose to an interview, by bus, since Jack had taken the family car. At the bus stop, Rose's brother verbally insulted her, and after receiving a distress call from the grandmother, Jack arrived, only to find Rose pinning her brother to the ground. The assistant gave Rose a thumbs up as Jack finally relaxed. After passing her interview, Rose started working. Jack watched over her like a stone idol, until his assistant suggested he rest. Rose caught them, leading Jack to playfully grab the assistant's bag, acting out a scene of devotion. Rose wondered why the boss treated a driver so well, even carrying his bag, and speculated he might have romantic feelings for Jack. Jack, astounded by her imagination, went along with it. When Rose visited the boss's office, she found Jack's photo on the desk, confirming their connection. She thanked the boss for looking after Jack, infuriated by the realization. She stormed off, taking the photo with her, leaving the boss baffled about what had upset her. While in the car, Rose received a call from her friend, who regretfully mentioned that her dog was unable to have puppies. Rose comforted her, suggesting that she could try with a different dog. Jack, however, misheard the conversation, thinking that Rose was talking about her own fertility issues and implying she wanted to try with another man. Furious, he slammed on the brakes. Rose, oblivious to his misunderstanding, casually remarked that she'd done this sort of thing many times before, making Jack's face turn green with anger. Their grandmother, observing their tension, muttered about when she'd finally get to meet her great-grandchild. Jack, thinking his grandmother was putting too much pressure on Rose, quickly claimed that he was the one who couldn't have children. The grandmother was shocked into silence, demanding to see a medical report to confirm it. Left with no choice, the assistant had to forge a report for Jack, but the secretary stumbled upon it, mistakenly believing that it was the assistant who was infertile, leaving him unable to explain himself. Rose's talents shone at work, impressing clients curious about her knowledge of luxury goods. The secretary suggested a tour of her home, unaware that the antiques were fake. Rose scrambled to hide the counterfeits, but her grandmother showcased them proudly, enlisting her wealthy friends for help. The clients were amazed by the priceless collection, and Rose suspected her grandmother's fakes were that convincing. That night, her friend dropped off the infertile dog for Rose to look after, and Jack finally realized the misunderstanding. The next day, Rose discovered she was pregnant while in the restroom. Just then, Jack's parents arrived unexpectedly, prompting her to hastily toss the pregnancy test into the trash. However, Jack's sharp-eyed mother spotted it and exclaimed, "She's pregnant." Jack's father, puzzled, remarked that it couldn't be her since she's already past menopause. His wife angrily corrected him, explaining it was their daughter-in-law who was pregnant. Overjoyed, the two rushed to the company to find Rose, eager to share the news. Upon arrival, they found Rose being harshly reprimanded by the secretary for allegedly leaking company secrets online. The secretary, aware that the senior chairman deeply detested anyone who leaked sensitive information, was hoping to watch Rose get into serious trouble. But to her shock, the chairman, Jack's father, responded cheerfully, saying, "It's just a few billion-dollar project leaks, no big deal." Stunned by his double standards, the secretary couldn't help but step forward, reminding him that someone like Rose should be fired. Jack's father nodded in agreement, and in the next instant, the smug secretary found herself dismissed on the spot. It turned out she was the true culprit behind the leaks all along. Upon hearing the news of Rose's pregnancy, Jack was overjoyed, practically dancing with excitement. He eagerly posted the announcement on social media, and immediately sent a message to his grandmother. At that moment, she was playing mahjong, and she enthusiastically shared the news with her friends, brimming with pride. Truly, Jack and his grandmother were two peas in a pod. Jack took Rose to the hospital for a prenatal checkup, but at that moment, they were spotted by Rose's parents. Furious about Rose injuring her brother, they angrily shoved her to the ground. When Jack rushed over, they boldly demanded $1,000,000 as a bride price, threatening to marry her off to Mr. Bai otherwise. Jack scooped Rose up and took her to the emergency room, declaring that if Mr. Bai dared to come, he could find him there. Mr. Bai stormed in, determined to teach Jack a lesson for stealing his woman. Jack's assistant arrived just in time, warning Mr. Bai that he'd be wise not to mess with Jack. However, Rose's parents insisted that Jack was just an ordinary driver, which only boosted Mr. Bai's confidence. The assistant had no choice but to give him a bit of a lesson, prompting Mr. Bai to call his father for backup, crying for help. When Mr. Bai's father arrived, Rose anxiously told Jack not to go out, but Jack reassured her. The moment he stepped out, the previously arrogant Mr. Bai Sr. froze in shock, realizing that Jack was none other than his own boss. Unfazed, Mr. Bai brazenly ordered Jack to kneel and apologize, even threatening to break his legs, oblivious to his father trembling beside him. He urged his father to teach Jack a lesson, and Mr. Bai Sr. nodded, agreeing they should do just that. In the next instant, a flurry of slaps landed on Mr. Bai's face, spinning him like a top. Confused, Mr. Bai couldn't understand why his father, a vice president, was so deferential to Jack. His father, nearly fainting, exclaimed, "Do you even know who Jack is? He's our top boss. And Rose is our boss's wife." Upon hearing this, he dropped to his knees, begging for forgiveness. The once arrogant crowd quickly followed suit, all kneeling in terror. Rose was astonished that her driver husband had scared off the VP and offered to treat him to a simple meal. Jack, intoxicated by beer, confessed his true identity, but Rose assumed he was drunk and reassured him she loved him as he was. Jack kissed her, but when he awoke, he was startled to find her friend's dog licking him. The secretary saw Rose and angrily blamed her for causing her to lose her job. She demanded to know if Rose was truly unaware that Jack was actually the boss of the entire company. Realizing that their cover was about to be blown, right there in the street, he pulled down his pants, leaving the secretary stunned and screaming in shock at the unexpected sight. Standing there in his underwear, the loyal assistant turned to Rose and said with utmost sincerity, "Madam, it's an honor to serve you." The former chairman, the current boss, the boss's wife, and the boss's grandmother all sat in a row, nervously awaiting Rose's judgment. Rose's expression was grim, clearly upset about them hiding Jack's true identity from her. But in the next moment, she threw her arms around Jack, exclaiming that she was the luckiest woman in the world. Seeing Rose's joy, everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief. The two went on to hold a grand wedding, where Jack placed a deep, heartfelt kiss on Rose's lips.